Well, we've got an unselfish striker in Haaland, the top scorer, and he's allowing his mate the space because they've worked out this plan before.
Manchester City jumped back into the top four of the Premier League with a 4-0 thrashing of Newcastle United at the Etihad on Saturday. Omar Marmoush hit a 14-minute hat-trick to send the City fans wild, but for Pep Guardiola, his focus immediately switched afterwards to Wednesday night's Champions League playoff second leg clash against Real Madrid. Guardiola has described City's chances of overturning their 3-2 deficit as just 1%, which doesn't sound good for City fans. But I'm Will Pugh, back in the Tactics Exposed studio with Sun Sports tactical guru Dean Scoggins. Dean, great to see you again. You have got 5 points, a little bit about the game against Newcastle and a little bit about how City may be preparing for Wednesday night's mega clash.
Yes, it's been a fascinating week, both backwards to the first leg, Newcastle, and now looking towards this one. But we start with Haaland, the decoy for unstoppable Marmoush, with his amazing hat-trick. Secondly, mini-Rodri, Pep called him, as Nico Gonzalez glued Manchester City back together. Ederson volleys, you've got to say that one out loud to get the pun, I think. But yeah, the goalkeeper with another assist, and we'll show how City did it this time. And now number 4, now for a real challenge. Obviously, huge game in the Bernabeu and on Wednesday night. And I give them a bit more than 1%. But yeah, and number 5, for Newcastle, from their point of view, it was a bit of an Ed scratcher. Eddie Howe, the tactics against Man City never seem to work. He doesn't have a great record against them, but it is Man City.
Absolutely, Dino. Well, I was at the Etihad on Saturday. Brilliant game it was. I was a little bit late. And I sat down, and then within 14 minutes, Omar Marmoush had banged those 3 goals. And of course, all I had in my head was the Tactics Exposed episode we did solely on Marmoush just after he joined. If you haven't watched that already, go back and have a look now. You might be very interested in some of the things that Dino got absolutely spot on, to be fair. But one thing that was different, Dino, on the weekend that I noticed, he got the 3 goals, amazing, but they were all from very, very central positions, whereas the episode we did, we were focusing, mainly because it was the first game that he played, was on his work out wide.
Yeah, and it was, remember, we used the phrase half space in that episode where...
Well, you did.
Yeah, I did. I explained it to you.
I never would have used that phrase.
but where Marmoush started on sort of the inside left, if you like, in that first episode we talked about, and I was really excited about where he is on the field, the positions he takes up and where he can run from. And one of the things we said was, and I think you asked the question of, was could he play in a 2 with Haaland? And, dare I say it, 4-4-2's coming back.
Yeah, it really is,
out of possession, we're talking about teams dropping into a 4-4-2 shape, and we'll show that again shortly. But then in possession, you're getting 2 strikers. And City did it against Real in midweek last week with Kevin De Bruyne. Yeah. And he played sort of up with Haaland, and I was surprised that Marmoush was a substitute in that game. But in this game, it was Marmoush playing effectively as the 9 and the 10 with, the big man and the small man with Haaland. And what was impressive, now, Pep gave Haaland the armband as well, which was a shock to a lot of people. I think there was a little bit of, I'm giving you a role to play in this game, and you're going to do it because you're the captain.
Yeah.
And that role was... shock horror, the best striker in the Premier League.
In the
world at the moment. Probably there was a debate with him and Isak before the game. I'll go with Haaland's goals. Thank you very much.
I will, yeah.
But you go with, basically he said to him, I want you to touch the ball less.
Yeah.
And when he gets criticised so much for having so few touches, that feels a bit odd. But what Haaland did superbly, right? We'll come back to this on Newcastle later in this chat. But Newcastle go 1v1. They like to go 1v1, in and out of possession. They trust their players in duels. They're very hard-working. They're very much an Eddie Howe outfit where you push against people. So what City did was absolutely suckered them in with Haaland. And what Haaland will show a grab early on of Haaland telling Marmoush to go into an area, and then they switch.
Yep.
And then the defenders go with Haaland, and then Marmoush runs in behind. And it's absolutely magnificent to watch, because as a defender... you're not going to just let Haaland go, are you? You'd be absolutely daft to. And in the early stages, a couple of times they were sensible, Newcastle, and they let Haaland have it in an area where he's not going to hurt them. Another thing we've talked about when we talk about defending against Haaland before. But then eventually he's going to suck you in. He's going to get you into an area you don't want to be. And we'll show Haaland's heat map. and basically there's this enormous gap outside the box where he doesn't get involved. He comes deep, he brings defenders with him, and that gives the space in behind for Marmoush to run into. And Marmoush did it once before he scored, then he did it for his first goal, he did it again before he scored his second goal, and it was almost like the perfect plan for Pep. And no matter what Newcastle did after that, it wasn't a lack of effort, it was just a little bit of a lack of tactical awareness about what Man City were doing. And Man City maintained the width massively wide with those two wingers, and then that left two up front. So it was like an old-fashioned two wingers and two strikers.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting for me is how, when you, obviously, where I was sitting was on, like, right on the side of the pitch, basically. And what happened so often, it seemed, exactly what you say, Man City sticking really, hugging really wide. And then, but Newcastle, they were falling for it, because what would happen a lot, 2 or 3, maybe sometimes 4, like a wall of players come towards Newcastle, you're thinking, oh, they're in trouble here. And then just a little move, and a ball in the middle. And Gundogan, countless times, was in so much space.
Just took the ball on the half turn, and that's we talk about that with Man City a lot, where they goad the press. You know, we've talked about that a lot. You know, with not just them, lots of teams do it. But obviously they're so good on the ball and with the goalkeeper with his feet as well. But I just was impressed as well with, if there's a really important point to make on Haaland, where on Marmoush's goal from the cutback, where you'd think as a striker.
That was his third.
That was his third.
So the one that goes down the right hand side, cut
ball
across,
comes
he's
across.
in loads of space.
Yeah, and you think that what are Newcastle doing? You think, how have they allowed Marmoush that amount of space? But it's because of Haaland. And Haaland, as you'd think, a selfish striker, obviously, you know, the old adage is, show me an unselfish striker, I'll show you one that doesn't score many goals. Well, we've got an unselfish striker in Haaland, the top scorer, and he's allowing his mate the space because they've worked out this plan before. And what he does as the ball goes wide, and it's actually before the ball goes wide, he drifts towards the back post. And you might think that is because if the cross is stood up, he's going to head it. Maybe that's another reason, but he's not. That's not the sole reason he's there.
And the reason he goes to the front post, isn't it? Sorry.
Absolutely, Typically, you want your number 9 to dart across the front or into the centre of the goal for that, touch finish, one ball finish. Pushing teams back. But Haaland just sort of not jogs. That'd be unfair. But he makes that movement towards the back post, which means Trippier and the centre back just go, oh dear, Haaland, and go that way. And then just leave this enormous space in front for Marmoush to fill his boots. And it was the Marmoush show. He scored the hat-trick. But the role that Foden played in dropping into spaces to allow the space in behind, the role that Haaland plays is absolutely fantastic. And what I loved about it was when Ederson had the assist and when they had the ball wide, they didn't just run to Marmoush to celebrate the goal. They went to those players because this was a plan. This was a genius Pep plan that came off perfectly. Yeah,
I mean, you only need to look at that first goal. And it was exactly that. That just tells the whole story. As great as your description was, to be fair. But it was just that. Haaland, you can see, he drops in. Marmoush knows what he's doing. He goes, I'll have that space. Bang, thanks very much.
And you can imagine Pep doing it on the whiteboard before, just going, you go here, they'll come with you, we'll go there.
Exactly.
That was it.
2-minute conversation,
absolutely.
we're all done. Point number 2, Dino, Nico Gonzalez. Now, Pep, after the game in the press conference I was in, called him the mini-Rodri. He was at great pains of saying, look, he's not at Rodri's level yet. He's the best in the world at it. He's the Ballon d'Or winner, as we all know. But I must admit, Dino, it was quite obvious being in the ground. I think Pep was almost not annoyed, but you could tell he was a little bit perhaps disappointed for Gonzalez that Marmoush had got a hat-trick. So he kept saying, Marmoush is going to get all the headlines, deservedly so, but, and then talked quite a lot about Nico Gonzalez, the impact he had. You could just tell, just that physical presence in the team made City look so much more imperious, just like the old days.
Yeah, don't worry, Pep, we saw it. We spotted it. We watched it, and I loved it, to be honest. I've got to admit, I hadn't watched as much of Gonzalez as I had of Marmoush when he came in. So that episode we did was, real focus on Marmoush for that reason, really, because I'd watched more of him. But I was really impressed. As I said, when you play against Newcastle, you have to match their physicality, right? You know you're going to be up against Bruno Guimaraes. You know now with Tonali in there, they've got the likes of Joe Linton and Isak, and even Anthony Gordon, to be fair, for his frame is really physical. You're going to have to match that, right? But there's we'll talk about his performance first, and then just switch on to the tactical side, right? So the performance, he was absolutely everywhere. The pass stats are amazing. 100 completed passes. He joined the play together. He won, interceptions, duels. It was physical all over the place. And do you know what was most impressive for me is that he reads the next pass. It's like seeing into the future. Like, so it's that
City
or both.
Right.
So what it is that type of player who thinks where the ball is going to go next. And that's so difficult to coach. It's so difficult to understand, and that's why Pep will be purring. Because Pep, as a midfielder himself, when you're in that position and you think it's going to go there, and then you intercept it, or it's going to go there and you stop a team playing out. We'll show a couple of grabs where Nico Gonzalez goes to a Newcastle player, which then stops the pass. So then it pens them into an area and allows a press, which means you can't get out. And City pressed so much better in this game than they have done in recent weeks. And that's because they've got that player backing up play. We've talked about it in episodes about Declan Rice. We've raved about Rodri, obviously. But if you've got that screen that comes in behind who reads play, and as I say, he's not reading just the first pass, he's reading the next one. And you see it the number of times where good Premier League teams, you think as a pressing team, we've got them, and they go bang, 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 and they come out of that position. And Nico is in that position. We're going to debate about whether we can call him Nico in a minute.
We can't. We can call him
He's got
Gonzalez.
Nico on the back of his shirt. Come on. It's Ahmad all over again. But he reads not the first one, but the one that's going to get bounced inside. And then that's where the contact comes. And he was just sensational. And then tactically, what it means, and here we go, nerd dial turned up a little bit here. Right?
Was it ever turned down?
Yeah, maybe not. We talk about often that we talk about teams want to set up in a 3-2-5 shape, where when they've got the ball, they go from 4-4-2 into 3-2-5. Yeah, we'll show that on the graphic. We've shown that a few times for those of you who haven't seen it before. But what City do is they're 2-3-5. And against Real Madrid last week, they did that with 3 centre backs. They had Stones in the middle and Akanji and Gvardiol either side. And that's because they want to win the midfield battle. But what that then does mean is you're a little bit susceptible going the other way if you lose the ball in transition where you've got wingers and only 2 defenders. So what Nico Gonzalez enabled them to do, and will enable them to do if he plays against Real on Wednesday, which you'd imagine...
There's no way he doesn't play.
Yeah, you'd imagine he will, is that then they can set up as 3-2-5. Back to a more normal, if you like, shape with the team going forward, where the wingers can still hug the wings, where they can still have the De Bruyne and Foden, and we'll debate Marmoush in a minute, in those positions, but knowing full well that you've got that 2 players in one in midfield that we talk about from Rodri. And look, it is a compliment calling him mini-Rodri, but almost not quite a compliment, because I would have thought Rodri would have walked off with a performance like that and said, I was probably man of the match apart from Marmoush today. So, massive addition and really exciting. Looking forward to midweek.
Yeah, that's exactly what Pep was saying. He definitely was man of the match if it wasn't for Marmoush. And it's interesting you say what we were talking about then about suckering Newcastle in. That is exactly what they were doing. The ball would come out, and it's funny. Gvardiol actually, the one Isaac had a really close opportunity, took a deflection off Stones and went wide. That came from a Gvardiol mistake.
It did.
Where they were trying to sucker them in. He was out wide, and the pass back in the middle towards it may have been Gonzalez or the centre back to then go was off, and then Newcastle ready.
And you only have 2 players there to defend that instead of 3, and that's exactly that moment. You're right. You're absolutely bang on. That's exactly that moment we're talking about. And that's about setup. So yes, a player's made a mistake, right? But players do make mistakes because they're trying to play out so often. But if you have Nico Gonzalez there, I think they'll play with a 2 instead of a 3 in that midfield shape. Yeah,
it's funny, but Eddie Howe afterwards said one of the things he was talking about, and although again your analysis is brilliant, what it felt like the most was actually, it's not very City-like, we're so used to talking how good they are at passing, tiki-taka football, actually just a big domineering presence, and Pep said it afterwards, who wins 7 out of 10 of your aerial duels and your on-the-ground duels, and Eddie Howe said he really missed Joe Linton, that's why we didn't look as good, because we weren't sort of
as combative
in the rough
there.
and tumble.
And if you think that 7 out of 10 duels, I think this is really overlooked when you look at the stats with someone like Nico Gonzalez, where he won 7 out of 10 duels, let's say. Then let's go, that's 7 out of 10, not great. Well, it is, because that means the other team have only won 3 of them.
3 out of 10. Exactly.
So if City have 70% of the ball from that, they're going to open it up going the other way. So really, really good.
Right, point number 3, Dino, Ederson volleys. Headers and volleys, I think, is the pun in there somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if it was all about his volleys and his,
I
his sidewinder kicks and all that. But
did he volley anything?
He did a couple out of his hands where he pinged the ball to the wingers, right? And that's important because that puts something in Newcastle's mind. That is, we can't just press the goalkeeper because then he's gonna ping it in behind us. So it leaves you in indecision. And again, we'll show a little moment where it's Maresca's tactic at Chelsea, where the goalkeeper comes in as the next centre back. And it just messes up the press. Yeah. You know, and I will say that Ederson is 20 times better than Sanchez.
I was just going to say that. Yeah,
and with the ball as well. Maresca would love to have Ederson there. But he moves into that centre-back position and it messes up the press because it allows City to split the centre-backs. So you've got those as easy passes. And as I said, because Newcastle like to go 1v1 everywhere, he's the extra man. And then all of a sudden, Isak's going like this because it's like, well, do I go to the ball or do I stay with my man? If I leave my man, he's just going to play it round me and then that direct ball into Gundogan again. And if I don't go, then he's got all the time in the world to pick this unbelievable, he hit about 35, 40% long passes in this game. So again, we are not talking about booting it. We're not talking about the team pushing up the field and then them trying to win a header and a flick on. We are talking about a guy who would play centre midfield for probably teams in the Championship and be the best player on the pitch, okay? He is drilling 40-yard balls into feet. 50-yard balls, he's hitting people's chests, and then they play from there. And it's absolutely incredible. And that's why I found City so fascinating the last few weeks, and I've probably watched them more than anybody in the last few weeks, is because Pep has changed this up. All the Arsenal fans got really frustrated when everyone was talking about the comparison with Tony Pulis, right? This is not an insult. This is working out what teams do against you and then counteracting it. Teams had put City under enormous pressure when they're playing out from the back. They weren't as confident. They haven't got as many confident players on the ball in those areas of the field as they had before. They want to push Guardiola on. They want to attack that way. So they're leaving more gaps at the back and people are exposing them. And so how do we counterbalance that? We start putting players on wings and a centre forward coming to feet with one running beyond where the goalkeeper is going to pick you off. And that's exactly what he did.
Absolutely. Honestly, I texted you this last night, didn't I? It's like watching a different Manchester City team. The amount of 20-yard plus passes they're playing compared to what it was before, where it's 5 or 6 yards just playing out. They're almost unrecognisable. But I know you say it's not booting the ball up to the big man getting flicks on. Haaland may not be getting flicks on, but the amount of balls that go directly into him, and he's doing the old Papa Bouba Diop wardrobe move and just trying to get it down off his chest and bring people in. It is a little bit of a 90s throwback.
It is, but when you've got players like Foden and Nico Gonzalez, who are unbelievable experts at second ball wins, then you've effectively moved the game into the area of the field where you know what you're going to do. And then they move into that 3-2-5 or 2-3-5 shape and play from there. And look, if City are 1v1 in the final third, I don't think anyone's arguing that they're a handful, but it's the problems that they had the other end, which is being solved by this, which, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a Pep Pulis graphic made up, see how he compares to the Mikel Arteta one.
A hat on. Yeah.
Dino, massive game on Wednesday for Manchester City. Like you said, Pep saying that they've got a 1% chance of overturning the 3-2 deficit at the Bernabeu Wednesday night, that second leg in the Champions League. If they'd held on to that 2-1 lead that they had, of course, with 6 or 7 minutes to go, I think they'd have been in a much better position. You're saying already, you give them a bit more of a chance of 1%, but what have they got to do to win?
Yeah, and look, Carlo's eyebrow being raised, obviously, at Pep's 1% claim.
Mind games there.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of mind games, because I actually think City were excellent in that first leg. And the first 10 minutes, they were a bit ragged and it was a bit nervy and there were a couple of early chances. But from that period until when Real nicked the 2 goals at the end, I thought Man City were the better team. They were better set up. So again, shock horror, 4-4-2, right? Real Madrid set up in a 4-4-2. Rodrigo to the right, Bellingham to the left, 2 midfielders in the middle, and that enables Vinicius and Mbappe to play as a 2 out of possession, okay? And then they spring from there. And what Man City did was overload them in midfield and beat them in midfield, But as I said before, that leaves them susceptible to that one going the other way. And that's where Bellingham made a nuisance of himself with the goal. That's where Vinicius did the same thing. And it again was set up. And so if City can, with Nico Gonzalez, go 3-2-5 in that attacking shape and be comfortable enough they've got enough in midfield, then I really think they can get some joy in the Bernabeu. I don't think they're out of this by any stretch. I really think they can go there and win. I think extra time is a real possibility. Yeah. And there are some big decisions for Pep to make. Kevin De Bruyne started that first leg and played very well, but wasn't quite De Bruyne. And we know he's not De Bruyne of 2-3 years ago. Marmoush didn't. Yeah. And Nico Gonzalez didn't.
There's
and
no
Foden,
way
Foden came on for Grealish as well.
Yeah.
So whether Grealish is fit or not might force his hand. Savinho's the other one. So Savinho, his work rate in that first leg was absolutely unbelievable. And it was the same against Newcastle. He covers so much ground. He almost enables you to go into that 3-2-5 shape because him and Guardiola play almost like wing backs, on that side. But I wouldn't at all be surprised if we see Marmoush instead of De Bruyne and Foden instead of Grealish. And that then gives you the ability, remember you're playing away and remember who you're playing against in that atmosphere, to be able to do the same thing with Ederson and sucker Real on and then go over the top of it and have that threat. If they don't start Marmoush and then Real score, Real will drop back into a shape and then there's no space for that Marmoush running behind. So there's a little bit of cat and mouse there perhaps. And, you've still got to, if you do start that way, there's still De Bruyne to come on. But yeah, Real Madrid set up in a very rigid structure, and you wouldn't think with the players they've got that that's the case. But they rely on Rodrigo and Bellingham as those wide/midfield players. So Bellingham will go wandering when they've got the ball, but as soon as they lose the ball, they come back into that sort of narrow midfield shape. And City got joy going round the outsides of it in the last game. Yeah. So if they can get them into a position where they can leave those two players up, then City will get some joy there, I think.
How do you think Real will approach it? Because if they still, with that crowd on their back, just because they're winning, they don't strike me as the sort of team who're just going to sit back and try and rest onto that one goal lead for 90 minutes, which means if they are going to come out at you, you want Marmoush and you want Savinho and their pace on the pitch, surely.
Yeah, and Ancelotti made a very clever little sort of tweak in the game where they didn't have many subs, Real, who were fit. They've got a bit of an injury problem themselves. But they don't forget they've got Mbappe and Vinicius and Rodrigo and Bellingham and Modric came on. Tchouaméni, Camavinga, they're okay, these guys, aren't they? But they've got that individual brilliance. So what Ancelotti is trying to do with that shape is, as we sort of said with Newcastle, create 1v1s. And then if you've got 1v1s, and as it turned out, Rico Lewis v Vinicius. I mean, Rico Lewis did pretty well in that second half after he came on for Akanji, but then the key moment in the game he lost. And that's, that is what Ancelotti does. In the first half, they were very rigid for a Real Madrid team in that shape, and they then try and pick the pocket and then go from Manchester City's, mistakes in that middle area. In the second half, the midfield box became much more of a midfield diamond, with Bellingham going into that 10 position and disrupting much more. Yeah. And that's what will be a really interesting battle, Nico Gonzalez against Jude Bellingham. And look, mouthwatering prospects. It's going to be a great game, and I really hope City score first for the sake of the game, because then we'll see a tactical battle between two of the best coaches on the planet.
100%. Right, Dino, just briefly, Eddie Howe was very disappointed afterwards, talked about winning duels, a bit of a first half collapse, really, but Manchester City were very good. Just talk to me about Newcastle, because 1 minute they look like the best team in England, the next minute they look like they can't hit a barn door and they've never played football in their lives.
Yeah, Alan Shearer questioned whether they were thinking about the cup final. I don't think they were. I think they got this slightly wrong. He mentioned Joe Linton, quite right. You've won, but Eddie Howe sets teams up, as I say, in more 1v1 shape, and he relies on players winning their individual battles. But he's had some brilliant tactical tweaks in previous weeks, where against Arsenal they push a centre back out right onto Declan Rice, right up the field, followed him all the way onto the edge of the other box to try and win possession back there. And what happened in this game, I think, was that City had picked that up and were like, well, they're going to track us. Yeah. They're going to track us. So they suck you into that area and go. But look, they're a fantastic team. And obviously with Isak up front, they've got that constant threat. And what they do is they set traps like they did against Arsenal. And against the mid-ranking and lower-ranking teams, they're thumping them. And, and they played very well against Arsenal. But, Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali are a solid midfield too. But without that extra legs and extra physicality of Joe Linton, Eddie Howe's shape doesn't quite work. And they're very, very dangerous when they play counter-attack football because of Isak over the top.
And Gordon as well.
And Gordon, absolutely, yeah. And they do this very clever thing, and they have done in games where when Joe Linton's playing, Joe Linton goes into the combat role, and then they've got Dan Burn and Hall at left back, and they almost play with two left backs. And that sounds a bit strange, but what that means is that then the Burn comes across to be the left back, Hall goes on to become almost the left midfielder, which allows Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali to sit and Joe Linton to go forward when Joe Linton's playing. And it leaves Anthony Gordon up front with Isak. 4-4-2 again. Who knew? It's making a comeback.